Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Inside BS Show. Today, we're talking about what to ask a lawyer when starting your business. That's right, we're doing a business lawyer profile for you, and my guest today is Sarah Sawyer. Sarah is a business lawyer with the law firm of Offit Kerman in Maryland. As an experienced business lawyer and civil litigation attorney, Sarah works with business owners to implement policies and practices that keep their businesses running smoothly. She helps them avoid expensive legal battles, and she fights for them when litigation arises. Sarah focuses her practice on providing her clients with business advice, drafting and analyzing employment documents ranging from employment agreements and severance agreements to employee handbooks, and litigating all aspects of general civil and commercial disputes. With a diverse background of representing large companies and small business clients in private practice and working as in-house counsel, Sarah recognizes the importance of understanding all aspects of a client's business when providing advice, whether it's compliance, complex commercial litigation, or business strategy related. When counseling clients, she takes the time to understand the ins and outs of her clients' businesses and employs a holistic approach when addressing their legal needs and concerns. I am really thrilled to welcome Sarah Sawyer to the Inside BS Show. Sarah, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
All right, so this is a business lawyer profile. So tell us a little bit about your background. Did you always want to be a business lawyer?
So I actually, I always did, but I did start my career as a prosecutor. So in the criminal realm of things, which was a great way to get into court and get some litigation experience and be in the courtroom right away, right after getting barred. But I always had my eyes set on wanting to represent business owners. So that's where I ended up here at Offit Kerman and doing what I love, which is great.
Okay, so what do you find to be the biggest challenge when working with businesses in the practice of law? As a business lawyer, is the biggest challenge helping people understand the risks they face? Because entrepreneurs are known as risk takers. What do you find is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I think that you really hit the nail on the head there as far as, risk assessment and figuring out where we can kind of blend together compliance and the practical, right? So a lot of strategy involved in that. So a lot of my job is to make sure that businesses, when they're getting started and as they are on their journey throughout, growing the business and all the way down to wind down phase or sale or any type of thing they might do, that they are balancing, obviously, the practical world that we live in with also the laws we all have to play by, the rules of the game, so to speak, and how to navigate those waters and figure out the best way to stay out of trouble while also growing their businesses.
So we're doing this interview at probably right at the beginning of the end of the COVID pandemic. I mean, we'll be navigating this for probably another 6 months or so, but you get the feeling that things are starting to wind down. When you speak with your clients, when it comes to business and the law, where the intersection of business and the law meet, what are you seeing related to the pandemic and your clients? Are there legal challenges that are specific to the pandemic?
Oh yes, a lot. So I've been doing a lot of work over the last year with business owners on COVID compliance as it relates to their employees, especially. Also some help navigating the new legislation, things, kind of different pieces of that as far as getting funding and those kind of things, but largely around the employment side of things and how to make sure that they're complying with new laws, which have been changing at a very rapid pace. I know as a business attorney, it really has been an interesting experience to feel a little bit like every day is a new law school problem, where it's just a new, unique problem. I mean, laws change, but in COVID, they change a lot more quickly right now, and there's a lot more regulations to keep up with. I've had a lot of clients ask me, well, what's the one place I should check to make sure that I know what the current law is? And I'm like, there isn't one. So there's a lot of places to check. You got to look at local all the way down to county. So it's like you start at the federal, see what the CDC is saying, see what the federal government's saying. Then you drill down to state. Then you even sometimes have to drill down all the way to your local city, county, municipality. So just spent a lot of time in the last year really staying on top of those updates and making sure my clients know what's going on.
You're unique in that, as far as I've seen, you're almost as comfortable in the courtroom as you are handling documents, handling, business advisory services like you just described. Which do you prefer?
I like both. It's not it's hard to choose one. I would say that they actually play together a lot more than you would think. So, it's really helpful to have both perspectives. So when I'm working on drafting legal documents, policies, or contracts, having the benefit of seeing how those things have played out in court is a huge advantage. So it is helpful, and then vice versa, right? So if I'm in court working with contracts and documents, policy documents, things like that, having been someone who's drafted those documents and worked very intimately with them and with business owners and their implementation of them also helps as well. So they really go hand in hand, and it's great to be able to help a client on the front end trying to, from a protective risk analysis standpoint, all the way through if things happen. Because especially, I've mentioned employment law a few times. I mean, that's something I deal with a lot with businesses. And when you're dealing with people, I mean, it's one of the biggest assets of your business, but it's also one of the most unpredictable because you're dealing with people. So that's something that often we do a lot of work around because that can often turn into very costly litigation.
Yeah, one of the things that I love to ask litigators all the time, this phrase, complex commercial litigation, I've never met a litigator who says to me, no, Dave, I don't do the complex stuff. I only do the stupid, easy litigation, right? Sarah, what's your definition of complex commercial litigation?
So really, when you're talking about complex, you're talking about getting involved in more issues, more cost, more, just a lot more of a heavier lift is why we're using that word to describe it. Because litigation really does run the gamut. I mean, we've got here in Maryland, we've got district court and circuit court. We've obviously got federal court as well. But in district court, for example, you've got small claims court can be an option, right? So that's when you're dealing with really smaller claims. As far as dollar amount is concerned, the cost of litigation is low. There's not a whole bunch of parties involved. It's, there can be, but it's usually not. It's a little bit more what you'd see on TV with the, Judge Judy, kind of thing, but not quite, but somewhat similar. So that's kind of on one end of the spectrum, and then you get onto the other end of the spectrum where you do have a lot more complex issues, complex things come with, that can be because of a high damage number, or it can just be, there's a lot at stake in different ways, because there's a lot of different costs associated with litigation, even outside of money. So
okay, so talk to me about what to ask a lawyer when starting your business, right? Because you've been a general counsel too. So let's say I'm a well-funded startup. What should I be asking my lawyer when I'm starting my business?
Usually I ask the questions first. That's, actually you want your attorney to ask you the questions sometimes. It's good to get, because a lot of times when you're starting your business, there's so many things to think about. You want to know where to start. And a lot of times the client has kind of some idea. They're like, all right, I want to protect my IP. I want to make sure that I'm paying my employees correctly. I want to make sure that I set my business up in the proper format that makes the most sense from a cost saving tax standpoint, and sets me up for my future plan, whatever that looks like, whether it's going to be sale or whether it's going to be having multiple entities. What does that look like? And so they have those general buckets, and I would say those are the kind of, to your point, are the kind of general buckets to be asking about. But really, I really like to take those buckets and say, all right, well, let me ask you, where are you headed? Because if I don't have an understanding of what your goals are, what the destination is that we're headed towards, and what the long-term plan is, it's really hard for me to tell you exactly what the legal plan should look like. And so that's really where I like to start off, is like, all right, well, what's your goal? What do we look like in 5 years? If you do everything right, what are we working with? How many employees are we looking at? How many entities are we looking at? What kind of IP? What kind of issues? Are you partnering with people down the road? What's what's this look like? So that I can give you the max amount of potential and options and flexibility in whatever we create.
So, based on what you just said, this is kind of a moot question now. But do you need a lawyer to start a business?
I would recommend having counsel, and I also just having a good team of subject matter experts, professionals, so that you have people in place. Your accountant, someone who's got your back on the tax aspect of things, and an attorney to ask these questions to, as far as putting the right documents in place. I mean, it's a lot easier to put things in place. I love when people call me when they're starting out, and we can always go at whatever speed and whatever pace. I mean, I'm not going to give you a 50-page handbook on day one when you're starting your business and hiring your
Right.
first employee, right? But I've always liked when people call me up front, so that we can get everything in place and then we can build from it instead of having to go backwards. I have clients come to me often. They're like, my business consultant put this agreement together for me. Well,
Oh.
that's those are interesting to work from, right?
I'm a business consultant, and I highly recommend you don't hire me to do your agreement. You hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that's so important, okay? And actually, you mentioned several things. When I said to you, what questions do you ask a lawyer when you're starting your business? As a business lawyer, you went through 4 or 5 different areas that are critical that most business owners don't think of. So, for example, intellectual property, okay? That's a profit center for your business, regardless of what business you have, if you protect the IP correctly at the beginning, right? If you're going to hire employees, right? If you're going to hire employees, you have to have policies and procedures in place and be fair and consistent. So making sure that you know that before you hire your first employee, that makes a lot of sense to me. Also, making sure you know what your trade secrets are and making sure that your employees are going to agree to protect those trade secrets when you bring them on board. All of these things have implications, not just at the beginning of the business, but throughout. This is the reason why, at least in my opinion, you got to have a business lawyer, and you need to contact that lawyer before you start your business. Tell us a quick story about some mistakes that you've seen, or a mistake that you've seen when people form their business that really hurts them later on. If they had you in place initially, if they had a business lawyer in place initially, they wouldn't have made those mistakes.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of two different categories. One on the formation side, so kind of referring to someone having their business consultant put their agreement together. Often they won't leave you the exit strategies that we would provide, or I would provide, is that you kind of get stuck in, because people get very excited. They want to get the deal done. They want to sign on to something, and so sometimes they end up signing on to terms that really aren't very good for them, or really limit their future action. Because they're just in such a hurry, so excited to get the deal done. They don't want to lose the investor. They don't want to lose the partner. They're trying to get this done, and they just want to do it quickly. And then they get stuck with these terms in a contract that's really hard to navigate around and build on and things like that. So then you bring us in and we say, well, here, we should redo this agreement. Ends up costing you more in the long run. Plus then you have to go back sometimes, if there are partners involved or other individuals involved, and negotiate then, which is, you're kind of now negotiating from behind, and you really don't want to do that. You want to have that discussion up front, because if not, if you're just kind of rushing it through and not putting the proper things in place, you're just setting yourself up for a future conversation and a future battle, and putting yourself at a disadvantage. Another thing I see often when it comes to employees, so kind of in that bucket of things, is paying people incorrectly, which is so this kind of brings me to the litigation side of things. Huge liability around paying employees improperly on the state and federal level. What seems like a really small problem can get really big really fast, and that's really hard and really damaging for a company when they're starting out.
Yeah, that's so true. I think one of the things that you mentioned it right at the beginning of the answer to that question. One of the things that we forget about is, at some point you're going to exit from your business, right? And your business lawyer is there to help you think about that right from the beginning, so that it doesn't cost you a lot more to unwind some of the things that you do up front. Okay, let's take a couple of minutes, because I know you a little bit, and I know you to be a very sharp business development person. I know you to be really good at marketing your practice, at Law Firm Marketing. So many people are wondering how to get business clients as a lawyer, right? I have a lot of attorneys who would love to work with business clients. So what is your strategy? How do you get business clients as a lawyer?
So a lot of it during COVID's obviously been a little bit different, but a lot of it's content marketing and putting that information out there. Having discussions like this, I find is helpful. And just really putting, I mean, with COVID especially, there's just been so much information to share, and putting it out in a way that business owners who are very busy with other things can digest it and say, all right, I need to know the answers to this. So a lot of people don't know what they don't know, right? So really providing value and saying, all right, well, here's how I can help, and really just trying to be service minded in that regard, and getting out there, getting information out there, and being a resource both amongst business owners, but also other service providers, and partnering with them, because there's a lot of my clients have questions for accountants that I can't answer. So I love being able to bring in another professional, to do some marketing together, or do some meetings together where they can answer those questions for my clients that I know that they have that I can't answer, and then we can help each other's clients out in that respect.
So you're a big believer in education-based marketing to attract business clients as a lawyer. Talk a little bit about some of the really cool stuff that you've done on LinkedIn. Share with the folks who are watching, the folks who are listening, some of the really interesting content marketing, education-based marketing you've done to attract business clients.
Yeah, so I've created a blog, Sawyer the Lawyer, my Sawyer the Lawyer blog. So a little play on my name there, make it easy to remember. But that's really a place where I have all of my content, and I've been placing it on LinkedIn as well, and do a newsletter. But I've been trying to really do a lot of different types of content marketing. So whether it be video, writing, little one-pagers, different things, because everyone's busy, everyone's got different things going on, and everyone absorbs information differently. So I've been doing some videos with my colleague Russell Berger called OK at Work, where we're really just having these types of conversations, Dave, where it's just really practical conversations around, well, what are employers and business owners asking themselves right now? There's a lot of questions and a lot of things to deal with, and what's some practical advice and some things they should be thinking about. So really trying to, as I kind of started this conversation, really trying to meld those two things together, the practical and the informational, and saying, all right, well, here's the law, here's the rule, here's the thing you need to be paying attention to, but what do we do with that? Where do we go from there? And so that's really what my Sawyer the Lawyer blog is really focused around, is the practical piece of that, because we all live in the real world, and have to try to figure out what to do with this information, right?
One of the things you mentioned for attracting business clients that I think is really sharp is doing some strategic alliance marketing. So if you were going to go out and do a joint seminar, let's say you did it during COVID times, you're going to do it virtually, but maybe in person as things begin to open up. Who would you, as a business lawyer, who would you connect with for a strategic alliance partnership for education-based marketing? Who'd be your ideal person to work with?
So who I've worked with in the past, it's been great, is I mentioned accounting or tax. That's been huge during COVID, especially because there's just so many things that, a lot of this legislation that's come out has checked both of those buckets, has had to do with the finances and the tax side. And there's been a lot of interplay. So we've got the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, say that 6 times fast, I dare you. But that had to do with tax credits, right? And how employers are going to get, so that was leave that people had to, employers had to provide, or business owners had to provide to their employees for whether they got sick with COVID or had childcare responsibilities. And then the government was going to reimburse businesses, or is reimbursing businesses for that leave. Well, part of that's through a tax credit. And how does that work? And what's the we can say that that's how it works, but how does it actually work? What do I need to ask my, to your point, Dave, about like, what questions do I need to ask these professionals in my life? It's like, well, what do I need to ask my tax professional? What documentation do I need to keep? How do I not end up in a situation where I get to the end of the year and go, oh crap, did I save all the right information? So that one's been one that I think really, having an attorney and having an accountant are really those two people that really, when you're starting a business, that you need to be talking to, I would say.
So people ask me all the time, how do I find the right business lawyer, or how do I find the right lawyer for my small business? What would you tell them?
I would say that you want to see who is. I think right now the internet's obviously got a wealth of information, so that's one place. It's just kind of see who in your area is speaking on the topics, or putting information out there on the topics that you're looking for help with. Also, it's a lot of it's recommendations, talking to other people, because there's a lot of lawyers out there. I know, Dave, you know a lot of them. There's a lot of attorneys out there, so you want to see who's going to be a good fit as far as making sure they're thinking about that practical piece. And I think that a way to kind of vet that is through talking to professionals that you work with, but then also just seeing what their footprint looks like, seeing what kind of work they do, and talking with them to see if they're going to ask you some of the questions that I shared with you here today, Dave, and really drill down into your business and really get to know you and your business. Are they asking you those questions, or do they seem like they just are like, all right, you need a contract. All right, I'll put one together for you. So because you want someone who's going to be a partner for you long term, be proactive, and is going to actually help you through the process.
This is something that I've been meaning to ask you. What unique insight do you think your time as general counsel has given you, and how has it, if at all, how has it changed your approach to how you advise your clients now?
Yeah, so I was general counsel for a bit, and I being on the client, that's like being on the client side, right? So it did help with the perspective, I would say, of just, well, when you've got a lot of things on your plate, and this is just one call on your list, is calling counsel to get advice and figure out what to do. It's really helps with that perspective of trying to figure out, well, how do I make things easy and take things off of people's plates, and really make the best use of their time when they're talking with me, be as efficient as possible, get them the answers that they're looking for, and really, what are they thinking? What questions, so I got to put myself in those shoes a little bit and say, well, what questions would I ask me, if I was calling, right? So I'm always prepared to answer those questions, and just ready to always pivot and make sure that we make the most use of our time, and that I can explain things to people in a way that that it's useful for them, because I can recite the law at you, but that's probably not going to really help, right? So I think it's really helped reaffirm that approach of making sure that the information is communicated in a way that is helpful and efficient.
Yeah, you're in their mind, you're in their head. You can enter the conversation going on in their mind because you've been there. And that's something that I see only in somebody who either has your experience, and you said I know a lot of lawyers, but there are two types of people who I see who are can very easily enter the conversation going on in the client's mind. The first is a second career lawyer. So I work with a lot of people who, were business people, and then they went to law school later in life. Those folks, they're inside the mind of the business person because they've been there, right? And then there's folks like you who you spent time as a general counsel, you know the business realities, right? And you can marry the legal ideals with the business realities in a way that allows you to enter a conversation from the perspective of the business person, which I think is a tremendous competitive advantage for a lawyer. I really do. I think it's incredibly helpful, because when the business owner says to you, hey, listen, Sarah, I would love to do that, but we just don't have the money. You can go, yeah, I get it. Well, here's an easier way to do it that, will keep you in compliance. And then when you grow into the way to do it full blown, especially when it comes to employees and hiring, you can be in compliance without spending $1 bazillion. And then as you grow, you can add pieces to your the benefits that you offer folks and everything. And, that's why people like you are there, to keep them within the confines of the law. Last question for you, Sarah. What do you think is the most difficult thing working with a business owner, particularly a small business owner? What's the biggest challenge from a legal standpoint working with a small business owner?
I would say part of it is what you're describing is that I want to do this thing and this makes a lot of sense for me financially and for my business and my business model. How do I do it? And that's really where I like to be able to step in and say, all right, well, let's figure out what the options are, and what the universe is, and trying to come at it from a standpoint. And so a lot of it's strategic. So it's one thing to know the law. You need to, that's the bare minimum. You need to know what the rules are, what the rules of the game are. But then it's taking that next step. And every business owner is different. So everyone's got different risk tolerance. And as I work with a client more, I get to know kind of where they are on the spectrum. And a lot of times can get more efficient with those conversations and strategy conversations, because you can say, all right, well, I know, X, Y, and Z client over here would probably handle this situation this way and would make this choice. But having worked with you, I think you're probably more in this category. But here's the universe. Here are options. Here's the risk associated with those options. And which way are we going to go forward? What are you comfortable with? What makes the most sense? And sometimes clients will make the decision to not follow the law, right? And that's not my decision to make for them. They need to make that decision. And I always say, as a litigator, I'm here. So if it does hit the fan and you end up in an issue, that's another benefit of being on both sides, is that we do everything we can to assess the risk, and sometimes the risk is worth taking for some folks depending on their tolerance. So, and I'll always be here to make the creative argument on the back end.
All right, Sarah, so how can people get a hold of you if they want business advice, if they want legal advice, if they need help with litigation because they didn't follow their lawyer's advice? How can they get a hold of you? Whether they're in Maryland or not, they can always call, and you can, if they're not in an area that you're licensed, you can definitely connect them with somebody who can help them. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so one way is you can Google Sawyer the Lawyer. Check out my Sawyer the Lawyer blog, which has my contact information and my information. But also my email address is sarah.sawyer, and it's Sarah with an H, very important. Sarah.sawyer@offitkerman.com. And then my phone number is 410-209-6413. So always happy to help. And as you said, Dave, Maryland is where I'm located, but we also have several offices on the East Coast, and then also a lot of connections nationwide. So always happy to chat or message and help how I can.
We're going to put all that information in the show notes, so if you want to get a hold of Sarah, all that information will be there. I highly encourage you to reach out to Sarah as your business lawyer if you're in Maryland, or if you're anywhere up and down the East Coast, because Sarah can connect you with somebody who's licensed wherever you are. And the reason you want to do it ahead of time is so you don't make costly mistakes. You don't make mistakes that are going to lead to litigation afterwards. But sometimes you can do everything right and litigation still happens, and when litigation does happen, you can call Sarah, because she can try and get it resolved without it costing you a ton of money. And if the other side decides that it's going to cost everybody a ton of money, Sarah can help you in that regard as well. Sarah, thanks for joining us today. It was great to have you. We got a lot of insight from you on what to ask when starting your business, what to ask a lawyer when starting your business. And we also found out a little bit about how to get business clients as a lawyer. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of the Inside BS Show. We'll be back here again tomorrow for another edition of our show. Until then, here's hoping you make a great living and live a great life.